my apologies to you. I'm sorry that it's late. I couldn't do anything about it. For Father Campbell, somebody once told me the day of your downfall starts when you start believing the people that introduce you. For Bishop Timlin, if we were the same age, how come he has no gray hair? Okay. Let me talk to you, as promised, about the developments of the Gospels tonight. And by the way, you're given 2 sheets. If you come back tomorrow, you're going to need the one that's the chart. Tonight, you need only the first one. The one that you can't read if you're getting as old as I am. Okay. I chose this topic because even though it can be done in a very elementary way, it can also be done on a very scholarly way. The question of how the Gospels were formed is still, I think, one of the most crucial questions that we face in scholarship. And I have no implication that everyone agrees with what I'm going to do. On liberal sides, in the last 4 months, works have appeared trying to prove that Mark's Gospel wasn't written until the year 180, that the apocryphal Gospels are the original Gospels and our Gospels are distortions, and so forth. And these are not by people who do not have first-rate scholarly credentials. So there is a whole wing of scholarship that, in a sense, really would undermine the historical value of the Gospels almost totally. On the other side, as you know well, either intentionally or most of the time simply because we've not talked about it, there's a whole group of people who simply assume that the Gospels are almost tape recorders of Jesus' words. And in fact, again in the last year, a book by a French scholar suggested that there were all sorts of people walking around with notebooks, copying down what Jesus said, and all of that has been preserved. So we'll never get unanimity on how the Gospels were formed. And yet still, it remains one of the most crucial questions for our appreciation of Jesus, and obviously, since they're the heart of our preaching, for the church and its mission. Now, I still think that this document that I've given you here, part of which I've given you here, because this is only a section of the document, constitutes for most scholars, and should constitute for most teachers, where you can get a good agreement about gospel formation, about the main lines of gospel formation. The document that I've given you, as I tell you there, is from the 1964 decree of the Pontifical Biblical Commission, which in itself had an interesting history because it clearly came at the direction of the church in order to help the church formulate the final document on divine revelation that came out of the Vatican Council. There had been a great deal of dispute about the question of the Gospels, disputes that involved the Holy Office, involved warnings and so forth. And at the early session of the Vatican Council in 1962, a document that would have been very negative toward modern biblical scholarship was rejected. And as a result, a committee was formed to research the whole question of the Bible, its role in Revelation, and the Pontifical Biblical Commission was asked to deal specifically with the historical question about the Gospels. Now, what this document gives you, the part I've described here, is a fairly simple approach, and yet it's phrased carefully enough that if we really reflect on it, it can give us insight no matter what level we're at in dealing with the New Testament. Some people are just beginning, many people are teaching it, other people have studied it. The only thing I've done to this document is put some headings which are drawn from the text so you can find what I'm talking about, and I've italicized some sections and and put some lines along them so you can find the passages I'm particularly concerned with. The basic approach is a fascinating approach. The question was one of revelation. And the revelation that's contained in the Scriptures as related to the tradition of the church. And while an older approach had talked about two sources of revelation and tradition, the idea came to the fore that you will understand Scripture better if you see that it's part of tradition. And I think, to my mind, that's a key to understanding the tradition. The Old Testament is the tradition of Israel. The New Testament is the tradition of the church. Therefore, you've got to see the Gospels as involved in the formative process of tradition. We can only approximately date the Gospels. Approximately, the common dating for Mark would be the late 60s, about 70, Matthew and Luke in the 80s, Mark in the 90s. The last third of the century. How were those Gospels to be related to Jesus of Nazareth? Now, the basic process, and this goes through, you work sometimes with Protestant scholars, and the same assumptions are there. You must move back two stages. One is the stage of the preaching. The next is the stage of Jesus himself. That in looking at the Gospels, you must always ask, what is the evangelist talking about for his people? What does this imply about the preaching tradition he drew upon? What does this imply about Jesus? The Commission takes those three stages